How long do you think you would stay human if you weren't allowed to sleep? This movie isn't about monsters or gore, it's about what happens when you aren't allowed to sleep and how quickly your morality disappears when survival is on the line. The scariest part is how believable it feels. Double Blind, directed by Ian Hunt Duffy and released in 2023, but in actuality 2024, is about 7 individuals who agree to participate in a 5-day medical study for an unknown amount of money. From the very beginning, there's a sinister feel to the pharmaceutical company running the study. It always feels evil to me when a building has multiple sub-basements. Maybe because I don't like basements, but it just feels ultra villainous. The film rushes through the first few days of the trial, showing the subjects undergoing various testings and the side effects of the medications they're testing, which they don't even truly know what it's supposed to be a medication for. The film rushes through the first few days of the trial, showing the subjects undergoing various testings and the side effect of the medication they are testing, which they don't even truly know what it is supposed to be a medication for. They learn quickly that insomnia seems to be one of the side effects, and the study shifts, with the doctor in charge, Dr. Burke, telling them their goal has changed. They're now testing just how long the subjects can stay awake. There's a lot of stuff that works here. There's a claustrophobic setting that might be more unsettling to some viewers than others, like myself, simply because I don't like basements. The tension builds and builds, hardly letting up. I was engrossed for the entire film. I didn't even get any crochet done. While there are minor jump scares, they're minimal. This is a psychological horror film designed to worm its way into your thought processes and make you think, not make you fall out of your seat. The actors and actresses feel grounded. Nothing's overly dramatic. They act like real people in the beginning. What might not work for everyone. The tension is high, but the pacing can seem slow in places. If you want like full-blown action all the time, this isn't necessarily going to be something for you. There's a cold clinical tone. You don't get a lot of direct answers. You have to figure out some things for yourself, and while there are hints, they're limited, and there seems to be a lot of missed connections in some of the Reddit comments I looked up when I watched the movie. This movie is for fans of psychological horror and thriller films, people who liked The Platform, Cube, Saint Maud. This movie sat with me for a long time and I had to watch it again. It might not have constant action. It might be considered a slow burn. I don't know if I'd call it that, but the questions it asks of us are worth thinking about. Who would you be if you weren't allowed to sleep? If you like horror that sits with you rather than just shocks you, this movie is worth your time. And from this point on, I'm going into full spoilers, including the ending. So if you haven't seen Double Blind, you don't want spoilers, now's your chance to stop watching. Feel free to come back after the movie and tell me your thoughts. Sleep deprivation in and of itself is a form of psychological torture. Cults use it to start the mind washing process. Our bodies need sleep to rest, to heal, and to remain human. And when you can't sleep, you can't rest, you lose the empathy that comes with being human. When Claire meets Allison, it's very obvious that Allison is meant to be an annoying character. Claire seems to dislike her from the start, but as the film continues, Claire still shows empathy for Allison's character. Her comment about Allison not having any true friends cuts Allison deeply. Let's face it, though, you can't really be that annoying of a person and not know it. People tell you when you bother them. Vanessa seems to be an off character from the start. She's very cold to the other girls in the beginning, and they even talk about her. The others say that she's always participating in these studies, and in fact it seems like all of them except Claire and Allison have done this before. The only information we get about Vanessa is she used to believe in God, and there seems to be some kind of religious trauma that Ray seems to know about, presumably from conversations they've had during previous trials. Like, they do speak as if they've spoken before. Amir is a med student who has convinced himself that he has a shot at an internship with the pharmaceutical company Blackwood, who is running the trial. He thinks that maybe participating in the trial will show them how committed he is to working with them. Marcus seems to be the kind of guy everyone wants to be friends with. He seems kind and compassionate. He runs around the cafeteria room to keep himself awake, and he shares an inspiring story with Claire to help motivate her of when he shattered his leg while hiking in the mountains, and if he stopped walking, he would have died. So he had to walk on a shattered leg for some time. And he says, you know, you have to do what you have to do. Ray feels like a bully to me, especially when he runs out of smelling salts and he tries to bully everyone else into giving some of what they had, even though everyone at the start were given 5. And then he used his up, even though Amir was like, hey, don't do that. He did anyway. And then he tried to bully them all out of theirs. And he only stops because Vanessa freaks out about the whole God thing, saying, I don't believe in God, or whatever she says. Paul is the reason for what I asked at the beginning of the video. How long do you think you would stay you if you weren't allowed to sleep? He assumes the others are a liability, and he tries to convince Claire to leave without Ray and Amir after spending the whole of the film seeming like this nice, down-to-earth guy. Poor Allison, while annoying, is the first to die. At the time of her death, we don't know yet that they will die if they fall asleep. But the timing of her death coincides with the lockdown of the facility, adding to the trauma of the moment when an alarm starts blaring and everything turns red. Things start moving fast after this moment. We had a group of strangers talking about how they were going to spend their money, and 3 minutes later we have a dead subject, a dead doctor, and an explanation. If you sleep, you die. The description of the movie is: when an experimental drug trial goes horribly wrong, 7 young test subjects, after being kept awake for days, must face the terrifying side effect of the drug. If you fall asleep, you die. Trapped in an isolated medical facility, they desperately try to find a way to reverse the side effects of the trial, as one by one they succumb to sleep and death. Panic quickly takes hold and they turn on each other. It's left up to Claire, the group's unlikely leader, to keep them together, find a way to escape, and somehow manage to stay awake. The isolation is immediate. We already had hints of claustrophobia from being in the sub-basement, but now there's the added terror of being trapped inside with no way to escape. Amir, the medical student and the closest thing to a doctor that they've got, goes to work almost immediately to try and save their lives. He finds the smelling salts, advises against taking stimulants, and works to see how the drug is affecting them and how they could possibly find a way to reverse the effects. Meanwhile, everyone else is focused on one thing: surviving. I was a little pulled out with the whole Amir thing because he didn't say what year medical student he was, but you know, in every other medical show ever, they talk about how dumb medical students are. So I really don't know if he would have known everything that he is to have known. I don't know though. So, yeah, I don't know. It pulled me out a little, but. So the impending moral collapse just feels inevitable from the moment we learn that they're going to die if they fall asleep. Most people know that lack of sleep can lead to hallucinations and a collapse of empathy and societal norms. So when Allison says they've been awake for over 100 hours shortly before her death, it sets a tone for the rest of the film. The longest I've personally stayed awake for is about 46 hours, and that was rough enough. Claire adapts well. Where Vanessa couldn't bring herself to touch the hot stove, Claire does what she has to do. And then she sees the escaped mouse from the lab, and it gives her the idea that they should tunnel through the wall, which fails. Obviously, they're in a sub-basement. But she hasn't slept for over 100 hours, so can kind of forgive her. A lot of things in this movie made no sense, and I saw people talking about that on Reddit and commenting on certain things the characters do, but they weren't taking into the account that there is no logic when you've been awake for multiple days. Marcus seems to adapt well, and he feels he's going to be fine because you have to do what you have to do to survive, and he tells the whole leg story, but he is the next to die after Dr. Burke, seemingly just falling asleep in the bathroom. I loved his death scene so much. It was so eerie, and it just felt so strange. I didn't even make the connection that he must be dead until the door opened in his mind's eye and he walked into the darkness. Like, that's obviously not actually happening. I was just tripping out about the noises when he's knocking on the mirror. When he just, like, walked into the darkness and it was actually just his pupil, that was one of my favorite transitioning, like, death scenes I've ever seen in a movie. Vanessa and Ray seem to be the first characters to truly break. When Ray becomes paranoid that Amir is somehow in on all of this, even though we as the audience know that he's not. Like, he couldn't be. He doesn't. No, he's not. Like, they even show the whole scene with him and Dr. Burke, and he's, like, offering to help, and then he's like, that would be unethical. Of course, I'm joking. Vanessa jumps on this bandwagon of Amir is somehow in on all of this, and that's how he knows what's going on, not that he's figuring it out. So, like, they come up with this plot, Ray does, to make Amir fall asleep to prove that he hasn't taken the drug. And this is basically a witch trial. Like, if he falls asleep and he dies, okay, he's not guilty. They don't seem to have a plan really on what to do if he doesn't die, but it's a messed up plan that shows their morality has officially disappeared. Ray turns out the lights to try and get Amir to fall asleep without considering that this could have deadly consequences for all of the remaining test subjects. Vanessa, after Ray's plan fails, plans to inject Amir with a sedative to put him to sleep, which would kill him. But they think he's in on the study, so they justify their murder plot. Unfortunately for Vanessa, she spends too much time standing there and thinking about what she's supposed to be doing that she falls asleep herself and dies. And when that happens, she also breaks the chemical mixture that Amir had come up with to try and save their lives while dying. Vanessa, coming from that religious trauma background, sees herself going to hell and meeting the devil as she dies, which is terrifying for her in her final moments, and it really hits hard with the audience, in my opinion. We learn a little later that Amir has been hallucinating Dr. Burke, and she's terrifying and blood-covered with, like, the best horror smile. Loved it. She's telling him that he's special and that he is the smartest one in the room. He's been staring off into space a lot during his screen time, and then so the viewer then makes the assumption that this has been happening since he first saw her sit up from the table that she was dead on. And he says hallucinations are to be expected. She convinces him to free himself. She shows him the knife on the floor that he can use to free himself and tells him that the only way that he is ever going to get out of here is if he kills everybody else. While this is happening, Ray is saying goodbye to Vanessa, showing a softness we had not seen from him yet. Claire and Paul are finding the autopsy room behind the wall, beyond which they find the elevator. I've never seen an elevator with buttons on the outside, but this is an Irish movie, so maybe that's a cultural thing. More likely it's they haven't slept in over 120 hours at this point, and it looks kind of like it could be an elevator thing. This is where Paul's morality disappears. He's unwilling to go get Amir and Ray, saying they'll just slow us down, and trying to convince Claire to just get on the elevator and escape with him. And then the screaming starts because Amir had broken free and he was stabbing Ray a lot with a passion that he hadn't shown about anything but work. Like, that panic that he was feeling in his chest is stabbing Ray. It's really a powerful moment. When Claire runs in and sees what the commotion is and Paul's right behind her, we can see that Amir isn't Amir anymore. He's been taken over by this sleep-deprived monster who has one goal: kill everyone, and then the doors will open. Paul's remaining morality runs out the door with him, and he abandons Claire to be murdered by Amir, trying to save only himself as he runs to the elevator. And I didn't know it was an elevator until this second time it showed up, when I made the connection with the buttons, as well as the fact that it's off an autopsy room. I recognized the metal room for what it was just before it started getting hot and Paul burned to death, paying the ultimate price for his betrayal of Claire. Maybe she would have noticed. Maybe not. Then comes the cleanup crew. Both Claire and Amir were just moments from falling asleep when the doors to the facility open again, and Amir, seeing the open door and tasting that freedom, that relief that must have been rushing through his veins, and then he's shot and killed by the Blackwood agents. The gunshots is what stops Claire from falling asleep, and she uses such a cunning to survive this purge of the survivors. Like, she bloodies her face up and gets in a body bag, and she's claustrophobic. Obviously this is life or death, so like, gotta deal with it. But when she gets tossed in the van, Allison with no eyes is like creeping up on her. That was a jumpy-ish moment. It was alright. Wasn't bad when it comes to scary moments in movies. But she's in this body bag, and Allison with no eyes is climbing up her body, and she starts doing that Tetris thing that Allison showed her in the beginning, and she morphs back into the smiling girl we all met and were annoyed by in the very beginning. Claire gets out of the body bag and the van crashes, and then it cuts to her in a hospital bed with a news reporter speaking about Blackwood being cleared of all wrongdoing from the trial, that Dr. Burke, who had spoken up for the subjects and tried to save their lives, had been a rogue agent, and the deaths of the 6 plus Claire's coma were solely her responsibility. And then Claire's eyes open, and we know that her story isn't over yet. Though we don't know if she takes on the pharmaceutical company. I would assume she does. But that's when the movie ends. So either she does or she doesn't. Fill in the blanks. How do you want it to end? So there is no clear resolution to this movie, but it works. It doesn't need one. This movie is about the exploitation of pharmaceutical companies. This movie is about control and autonomy, and it's about science without ethics. What happens if a company feels they can do whatever they want and knows they will face no consequences? That was a human-sized autopsy table in a research facility with a built-in crematorium in a sub-basement. The company had a hit squad ready to go the moment those doors opened. This is not Blackwood's first rodeo. Double Blind is showing us what happens if one of our basic human needs is taken away from us. It's showing us how fear can completely reshape identity and sense of self. This movie isn't asking who survives, it's asking who they become. Double Blind is a horror movie that traps you in a system and refuses to let you escape even after the credits roll. I strongly recommend this film to anyone who likes a good psychological horror, a good thought piece, and a good commentary on some of the messed up things happening with the world today. We always say you never know what someone is going through. We can watch this film and see some of the ways we are shaped by those around us and the traumas we experience. This movie has 100% on the Rotten Tomatoes tomato meter, and I honestly would give it a 9 out of 10. It's worth watching. If you liked my video, please like and subscribe. This is a new channel, and this is my first movie review. So I'm sure I still have a lot to learn. This isn't going to be the best quality. Hopefully it gets better from here. Next time, The Possession of Michael King, which is a found footage film that goes further than it probably should. Don't forget, Shanna's watching.